The first thing Eli Mercer noticed was the child's cry cutting through the prairie dusk like a blade, thin and sharp, the kind of sound that made a man stop mid-step and wonder what kind of world he had helped build. Eli had been riding fence all day, dust in his teeth, sun baked into his bones, thinking only of cattle prices and a broken windmill, when he saw her standing near his north gate, a woman too thin for the land she stood on, holding a bundled child against her chest. The sky behind her burned red and gold, and for reasons he could not yet name. Eli felt like that cry was meant for him alone. She did not beg at first. She just stood there, eyes steady, shoulders squared like she had learned the hard way that weakness cost too much. The child whimpered again, and that was when Eli swung down from his horse, boots crunching on dry earth. He had a rule about strangers, especially women with stories and men with guns. But rules were easier to keep when hunger did not have a voice. He asked her name. She said Clara. He asked about the child. She said Samuel. And when he asked what she wanted, her answer came soft but solid. Just food for my boy. One night is all Eli had fed cattle and hired hands, and the occasional drifter. But something about the way she said, my boy, made the promise form in his chest before he could stop it. He told her he would feed the child, give him milk and bread, maybe stew if there was enough. He said it like a transaction, a rancher offering charity with limits. Yet, as he opened the gate and waved her in, he felt a strange tightening behind his ribs, as if the land itself had leaned closer to listen. Clara nodded once, no tears, no thanks, and followed him toward the house inside. The ranch house smelled of coffee grounds and old pine. Eli poured milk into a tin cup, broke bread with hands rough from years of work. The child ate slowly at first. Then, with the fierce focus of hunger that had gone unmet too long, Clara watched every bite, her shoulders easing inch by inch, and Eli found himself watching too, not the child, but the way light touched the woman's face, showing lines earned too early. He told himself it meant nothing. This was just one night, one meal, a promise made and soon to be finished later. As night settled and coyotes sang far off, Eli sat on the porch with a mug gone cold, listening to the quiet breathing inside. He had meant to set her up in the old bunkhouse, but the wind had risen, and the child had fallen asleep by the hearth, so he let them stay. The promise had already bent once. He told himself it was only practical. Yet his mind kept drifting to the look in Clara's eyes when Samuel finally slept full and warm. It was not gratitude, it was relief. Deep and aching, he thought about his own emptiness then, a thing he rarely named. The long years after his wife had been buried on a hill overlooking the creek, the way the ranch fed his body but left his spirit thin. Eli had believed work was enough, that tending land and livestock could fill every hollow. But as he listened to a child breathe under his roof, he felt something shift. Like soil breaking after a long drought, it unsettled him. Because men like Eli Mercer did not change. They endured before dawn. Clara was awake, trying to leave without sound. Eli caught her at the door. She stiffened, ready for refusal or worse, but he surprised them both by asking where she planned to go. She said west, anywhere with work and fewer questions. Eli looked past her at the pale sky and made another promise before sense could stop him. Stay a few days, he said. Help with cooking. Rest the boy. No debt owed. Just time. The words felt heavier than the first promise, and far more dangerous as the sun rose over the plains. Clara nodded, not trusting hope, but not refusing it either. Samuel stirred and smiled in his sleep, and Eli felt the land breathe with him. He had promised to feed a child, nothing more. Yet standing there, dust and dawn wrapping around them, he understood with a quiet fear that some promises, once spoken, did not end where a man expected. They burrowed deep, feeding parts of him he had forgotten was starving. Morning on the Mercer ranch came hard and early, the kind that did not ask permission. Clara learned the rhythm fast. The scrape of Eli's boots before sunrise, the kettle set on the stove while the sky was still grey. Samuel sitting on the floor with a scrap of wood and a string. Quieter now, steadier, food doing its slow miracle. Eli noticed everything even when he pretended not to. How Clara worked without complaint. How she conserved motion like someone long used to scarcity. How the boy laughed when chickens scattered at his feet. The ranch, which had felt hollow for years, began to sound alive again. Eli put Clara to work in the kitchen garden and later mending clothes. She did not ask for wages, and he did not offer, both of them pretending this was temporary. But days have a way of stacking into weeks. and weeks into something that feels like a choice. Clara told him pieces of her past in the quiet spaces. Not all at once. Her husband dead from fever on a freight road. The town that looked at a widowed woman with a child like a burden already counted. The nights where Samuel cried and she had nothing left to give him but arms and prayers. Eli listened, hands busy, heart not, each word settling somewhere deep. Rearranging him trouble came the way it always did, riding in on dust and loud voices. A cattle buyer named Harlan who had known Clara's husband, his eyes sharp with recognition and something worse. He spoke too freely, hinted at debts, at promises Clara had never made. Eli stepped between them without thinking, his voice calm but final. This was his land, his house, his concern. The silence afterward felt like a line drawn in the dirt. Clara stared at Eli as if seeing him for the first time, not a rancher offering charity, but a man choosing a side that night. Clara confronted him, asked why he did it, why he risked trouble for a woman and child who were not his. Eli searched for an answer that did not frighten them both. He spoke of fairness, of decency, of a promise already made, but the truth pressed harder. He was tired of living like nothing could touch him, tired of a house that echoed. Clara heard what he did not say, and for the first time, the space between them felt charged, full of words neither dared speak. Samuel grew stronger, running the fence lines, calling Eli sir one day and uncle the next. The word landed heavy and sweet. Eli corrected him once, gently, then let it go. The boy had claimed something Eli had long buried, a place in a future he had stopped imagining. Clara watched this bond with a mix of gratitude and fear. She knew what attachment could cost, knew how quickly the world could snatch things away, yet she could not deny the way her own heart eased. Knowing her son was safe, at least for now. The land responded to cattle calving easy, rain coming just when it was needed, neighbors remarking on how the Mercer place looked less lonely. Eli laughed it off, but at night he lay awake, aware of how close he was to breaking the careful order he had built. He had promised to feed a child, not to invite a family into his life, yet every day made the promise feel smaller, the consequence larger. When Clara spoke of leaving again, it came softly, like a test. She said Samuel was well enough now, that she would not overstay her welcome. Eli felt panic rise before pride smothered it. He told her she was welcome as long as she wished. The words hung between them, unmistakable. Clara nodded, eyes bright with unshed tears, and in that moment both of them understood the danger. Staying meant hope, and hope always demanded payment. That evening, as the sun bled into the plains, Eli watched Clara and Samuel walk toward the creek, their silhouettes fitting the land like they belonged there. He realized the promise had changed him. Feeding the child had fed something starved inside his own chest, and the man who had opened his gate for one night was gone, replaced by someone standing at the edge of a future he had not planned but could no longer refuse. The reckoning came with the season turning, as reckonings often do, quiet at first, and then all at once. Harlan returned with 2 men and papers that smelled of ink and bad intent, claiming Clara owed passage money from the freight road, claiming the boy could be taken as leverage. The words were ugly and sharp, and they landed hard in the yard where Samuel played. Eli felt something old and dangerous wake up in him, not anger alone but resolve, the kind that had once carried him through loss and long winters. He told the men to leave, told them again when they laughed, and the third time his hand rested on the rifle by the door. The land seemed to hold its breath. What followed was fast and ugly, not the kind of fight that stories polish into legend, but the kind that leaves bruises and dust in your mouth. Eli stood his ground, neighbors drawn by raised voices and the smell of trouble. Harlan backed down when he realized the ranch was not isolated anymore, that promises made in daylight carried weight. Clara watched from the porch, Samuel tucked behind her skirts, seeing for the first time what it meant when someone chose to stand between you and the world. When the men finally rode off, threats trailing behind them, the ranch felt altered, as if a line had been crossed that could not be uncrossed. That night Clara packed, hands shaking, saying she would not be the cause of violence on his land, saying she had already taken too much. Eli stopped her with a single sentence, spoken low and steady. "You are not a burden, you are a blessing." The words surprised them both. He had never named it before, never dared. Clara cried then, the first time he had seen her break, grief and relief tangling together. Samuel woke and wrapped his arms around Eli's leg, and something inside the rancher finally gave way. Eli told them about his wife, about the child they had lost before breath ever filled his lungs, about how he had sealed that pain away and let the land be enough. Clara listened, understanding in the way only someone shaped by loss can. She did not try to fix him, she simply stayed, and in that staying, Eli felt the slow work of healing begin, not loud or dramatic, but steady, like rain soaking into dry ground. The decision came with the morning light. Eli offered Clara partnership, not charity, a share in the ranch, a future built on work and choice, not obligation. Clara accepted with a nod that carried all her courage. Samuel danced at the idea of staying forever, of seasons that did not end in hunger or fear. Neighbors adjusted, some surprised, some approving. The Mercer ranch changed its shape, no longer a place held together by one man's endurance, but by shared purpose. Years later, people would say it was the boy who saved Eli Mercer, or the woman who softened him, but Eli knew better. It was the promise, simple and small, made at dusk to feed a hungry child. That promise had demanded more of him than he expected. It had asked him to open his gate, his house, his heart, and in doing so, it had fed parts of his soul he thought were beyond saving. On quiet evenings, Eli would sit on the porch with Clara beside him, and Samuel chasing fireflies, the plains stretching wide and forgiving. He would think about how close he had come to riding past that cry at the gate, how easily he could have kept his rules and his loneliness intact. The thought made him shiver, gratitude settling in its place. The ranch thrived, not because the land had changed, but because the man who tended it had. He learned that what you feed grows, whether cattle or hope or love, and that sometimes the smallest promises carry the heaviest harvest. Eli Mercer had fed a child, and in the doing, he had finally learned how to feed himself too.